everybody. My name's Bella Abrams. I'm the IT Director from the University of Sheffield and a trustee of Volt, and I'm today's session chair. And I'm really pleased to introduce you to our session, How Are Students Experiencing Their Learning Online, with our two speakers, Sarah Knight and Clare Killen. So I will be monitoring the chat for any questions that come up. So I'd like to ask participants, if you do have a specific question that you'd like to ask, could you preface it with a Q so I can have a look and kind of get everything ready for the 5 minutes questions at the end. But without further ado, I'll hand over to Sarah, who will do our presentation.
Thank you, Bella. Really delighted to be with you here today and co-presenting with Clare Killen. We're going to be doing a double act, and we're absolutely delighted that you'll be hearing out from our newly launched Digital Experience Insight student surveys, and the findings that we are going to be sharing is just a taster, really, of some really fascinating findings that have come through from the reports that are published today. So I know Claire will be adding links into the chat as we go through the presentation. And really what we hope to do today is just to be able to whet your appetite in terms of thinking about how the data that we're sharing at a national level really ties in with the data that you have available at your local level within your college or within your university. And in particular, thinking about some of the themes that I know are going to be running through the entire conference around how we can better prepare and better support our students for their digital experience going forward. So it is going to be a very quick overview. There's going to be lots of interesting stats to go away and have a deeper dive into. But we've really tried to pick up some of the areas that tie in more closely to the strand and the track of the conference that we're in at the moment around inclusive learning. Now, never before have we had the high number of participants in our surveys this year. And I think this shows the real importance that digital and online has played over the last year. And our students have really welcomed the opportunity of feeding through their voice, their views, and their challenges. As you'll see there from those figures, over nearly 39,000 higher education students and nearly 24,000 further education students have shared their views. And the reports are hot off the press. They're launched this morning and available from that link there on screen. And just a reminder that our surveys, which were originally piloted in 2016 and have evolved every year, so we've really got a very strong set of national data and a longitudinal set of data on how the student experience has changed over time within the UK. But the survey questions this year focused around 4 themes, which covered individual and organisational use of technology, how technology is used in learning, teaching and research, and support for developing digital skills. Our surveys this year focused very much on the online learning experience, and our participants were asked to focus on their experience in their last 2 weeks of learning immediately prior to taking the survey. So I hope you enjoy some of the snippets we're going to share with you. I hope you will be encouraged to go off and have a look at the reports and delve into them in more detail, and particularly think about what you can use in terms of informing your planning for the year ahead. Now, bearing in mind the theme of the track around inclusive digital learning experience, it's really important that we're able to think about the areas online and in that blended environment that can really encourage and support our learners to have that inclusive learning experience for all. Students, as we've heard in some of the other sessions this morning, as in one earlier from the University of Nottingham, very much appreciated the efforts that colleges and universities have made and with their staff in actually ensuring that learning online has continued in the way that it has. Students have told us that what really helped them to learn, as well as some of the barriers that they've faced. And I don't think any of those will be a surprise. I think those are themes that we're seeing across all sectors, both in schools as well as higher and further education. But there are, apart from some of the barriers and some of the challenges, there were some notable benefits that students were reporting, enabling them to review the resources and work at their own pace, around other commitments and having that flexibility to where they studied, facilitating, encouraging independent learning, and they felt safe and saved both time and money in learning online. But there were also, as we can see on that slide, the challenges there, and for some major barriers in their participation in accessing their learning. So I'm going to share with you some snippets from theme 1 to start with, just to set the context in terms of how students were learning and really how their expectations perhaps changed from what they originally thought when they had signed up and started learning in September this time last year to what they actually experienced. So as you can see from that slide, there was quite a great contrast in expectations of students. And this was then reflected that not all students were prepared or well equipped really for online learning. We know that there's huge efforts made by colleges and universities to try and address some of the digital poverty issues, but very few students really expected to be studying entirely online. The majority still expected a blend, and substantial numbers really expected to be fully on campus despite the ongoing pandemic. And certainly more could be done to make students aware of the value of assistive technologies and accessibility features built into everyday software, but we'll pick up on that theme as we go through the presentation as well. And problems that students encountered when learning online. There's some interesting similarities and differences there on that slide in relation to those students that were studying in HE and those students that were studying in further education. FE learners studying at entry level or from a Black, African or Caribbean backgrounds were more likely to have experienced problems. Learners who did their learning online from student accommodation or from public spaces were also more likely to cite issues in doing so compared with all learners, although the absolute numbers of those doing so was low. I think it's no surprise there that we're seeing issues in relation to poor Wi-Fi connection and of course the mobile data costs coming through quite strongly there. HE students from Black, African and Caribbean backgrounds were more likely to say they had no access to a suitable computer or device. And the overall survey data also and also cited issues with mobile data costs, along with students from Indian, Pakistan and Bangladeshi backgrounds. Students studying online and on campus or in public spaces were also more likely to cite problems with a range of issues. I'm going to hand over to Claire now to talk through some of the stats that were coming through from theme 2 in relation to digital platforms and services in colleges and universities.
Thank you. So in theme 2, we looked at the learning environment and the platforms that they were using and how students felt about that. And we asked them to agree, remain neutral or disagree. I've only given the agree options here. So you can see the stats there, you know, they're fairly standard. They're sort of hovering between sort of 40 and high 60s for most, apart from 1 or 2. So, and the last stats about being given the chance to be involved in decisions about online learning, I'd like you to note that although these may look lower than is desirable, they are actually significantly higher than we have seen to a similar question in previous years. Interestingly, we found that students who'd been studying at their organisation for less than a year, for both further and higher education, were more likely to give positive responses than others. In further education, they were more likely to say that their learning environment was well designed and easy to navigate than students who'd been studying there for more than 4 years. But students who had been there 4 years or more were more likely to agree that their online learning materials were engaging and motivating. So, you know, there's a slight difference there. In higher education, they were more positive about their learning environment than students as a whole. But there are some that you can see that are lower. Could you move on for me, Sarah, please? So theme 3 is about technology in your learning. And here we looked at the quality of online and digital learning. And, you know, again, we've got what might appear to be similar questions, but this is specifically about the quality of online and digital learning. And I was, good synergy between further and higher education. 67 and 66% of students rated it as either being the best imaginable, excellent, or good. But some of the things that were picked up were the pace. Less than half felt that the learning was at the right level and pace, and that there was less collaborative, interactive, engaging online. And there were quite a lot of comments on those aspects in the free text statements that we'll come to later. Could you move on for me, please, Sarah? So in the range of learning activities, the full set of variables we asked here was 10 variables. I've just picked some of the highlights there. You can see that live lecture and teaching sessions were fairly high. For higher education, more were accessing recorded lecture sessions, but I think before COVID, it would be fair to say that far fewer FE learners would have experienced recorded lectures than they have in the pandemic. So there are some differences. I was a little surprised by the lower stats in that not more than 60% had submitted coursework, that only 40 to 50% had online discussions, and the low numbers for receiving feedback. So, and the stats I haven't shown on screen here, in higher education, only 17% had participated in virtual lab, practical or field work. And for further education, that was down to 6%. And I know that's a sign of the pandemic, but these are maybe targets to aim for. Could you move on for me, please, Sarah? I think we're back to you.
Thank you, Claire. And this theme, in the last theme, we were looking at the skills and the support that students had received. And here, students felt fairly positive around the support they'd received for online learning on their course. But you will see from some of the stats on this slide that there is still areas where students in both further and higher education are requiring further support. We heard in this morning's keynote the importance of ensuring that digital literacy, digital capabilities, media literacies, those skills data literacies were all embedded into the curriculum, and in order for students to be able to develop those skills in an ongoing manner. Unfortunately, we'll see there that despite the heavy reliance on technology over the past 12 months, students still felt they did not necessarily know the digital skills that they were needed for their course, and also did not have a way of being able to assess their digital skills and training needs. So those figures still remain low, and those figures have remained fairly at a constant level over the past few years, despite the growing importance and the growing need for students to have the awareness of the digital skills they need and the ability to develop those. Interestingly, with the theme of data literacies, students, only 21% of higher education students felt that they were able or had the support needed to know how to keep their personal data safe. So there are areas there which we do need to work on, and ensure as well that at the start of the academic year there is support for students in these areas, and that continues throughout their journey. Students sort of offering an assessment for digital skills and training needs at the start of a programme can really ensure that students are aware of the areas that they need to develop going forward. So Claire, I'm going to come back to you now, because we're going to hear from your work that you did around the qualitative data, which was, as you can imagine, with the volume of data, listening to the student voices gave some very powerful insights into their areas that they were enjoying and also the challenge areas.
Thank you. This is the bit that I enjoy the most, reading the student comments. It really is gold dust. I'm going to just sum up. I'll leave the comments there for you to look at. But There were lots of similar comments across both. There was talk about more efficient use of time when you're studying online, and that it actually gave you extra time for study, the time you weren't traveling. The flexibility and pace was another big feature. Being able to stop, record, if you don't understand something, go back, do your own research, and then pick it up again. Learners really valued small group work, breakout rooms, and the interactive aspects. Found it easy to access resources, felt supported, and felt safe and comfortable at home. If you move on to the less positive aspects for me, Sarah. So the negative aspects, it's very Marmite. What some learners like, others will not. So students reported a lack of interactivity, difficulties for practical subjects, difficulties accessing the platforms or the learning, which we looked at in theme 2, not being able to find things. So VLE is not well structured. Interestingly, a lot of work overload. Some felt that they were asked to do much more. And the general impact on the learning experience, as well as some reported fatigue, lack of concentration and motivation. If you could move on for me, Sarah. So we asked what one thing could we do to improve, and we were given an awful lot of feedback here. In the centre, you'll see, ask the students what sort of teaching they would like online and what activities. That aligns very neatly with the OFS Gravity Assist report. Some asked for support for the teaching staff, some asked for the learner environments to be more streamlined. There are thousands. I mean, there are over 60,000 individual comments, so it's a rich list. I'm going to hand over to you, Sarah, and you might want to show. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Claire. And I think from all of that analysis and from that, the question can give some really, or can some highlight some really key areas to really delve deeper into and to focus down into. What we have done and what we have taken from that analysis in consultation with students within universities and colleges has been to develop our benchmarking the online student experience toolkit, which was an update on the work we did with NUS in relation to benchmarking the student digital experience that I know many of you have sort of referenced over the years, and to be able to provide a toolkit point really to look at the different areas of experience, focusing on sort of access to online learning, looking at the online learning environment, look at learning and teaching and assessment and wellbeing online, and your practice staff, but also where you are online there. So we hope that in addition to the reports, that this will be a really valuable toolkit for you to be able to take, to have conversations and just within your college or within your university, and to really make sure you're having that ongoing dialogue with students. For us, the whole premise and the whole purpose around doing these surveys is very much to support you with that ongoing dialogue with your students, to really help you to look at ways in which and other approaches in which you are drawing together not just the quantitative data, but the really rich conversations that you can have with your students around really co-designing and working in partnership with your students in their online learning experience. So, as a point of reflection, please do think about the practice that you have locally and what opportunities are there for you to really engage your students moving forward. Claire, I'll hand over to you for ending the session.
I think we're probably going to questions, are we, Bella?
Hello. Yes. Yes, we've got a few questions for you. So our first question is, FE appear to be outperforming HE in the stats. Do either of you have any thoughts about why that might be?
I can answer that to some extent. Sarah may have other views. At the time, during last autumn, October to December at least, FE learners were allowed to go into college where HE learners maybe were not. So they were having quite a different experience. Generally, the FE sector seems to have a loyalty towards their staff and feel they are being well supported. But there were some differences between there. I think you're just looking at different audiences and different experiences.
And I think just to add to that, Claire, I think different expectations as well. As you say, HE students very much were expecting, their provisions happen on campus. So yes, some interesting areas, but I think also perhaps shows the journey that FE have been on in relation to the developments that they have put in place for using technology, across the board.
It's brilliant to see, actually. It's been a couple of years since I worked in FE, but that's where my heart
I know.
So I'm absolutely ecstatic that they've moved on so far. I had a question which was actually around pace. It wasn't clear to me from the slides. Are the issues that students were experiencing around pace, was it too much, or was it too fast or too slow?
It was all of those. So for some students, it was too fast. And some students higher and further education gave comments like, in a lecture, I can do one of two things. I can either pay attention to the lecture or I can make notes. I can't do both. So having the recording allows me to go back, listen to it again, stop it and pause it whenever I want, make my notes, review my notes, improve them. And if I don't understand something, I can go and research it. On the other hand, some said it was too slow and they weren't doing as much learning as normal. So there's something about, just as in the old days, and I've earned my stripes in FE2, Bella, differentiation. You need to do that online as well as in person.
And I think the other point to add to that is that it is about knowing your students. And I think, we know that one size doesn't fit all and that there will be differences that students will be experiencing. But I think it's also encouraging students to think about their study approaches and giving them different strategies to in the different ways that they are being sort of the learning online, as you would be sort of in a face-to-face environment as well.
Yeah, some students recognised that it was very hard for their lecturers and tutors to read the room online. And one of their suggestions there in what could we improve were to have regular check-in points, how are you doing? What do you need? Those were some of the suggestions they came up with.
That's great. I've just had feedback that I'm a bit quiet, so I'm just going to shout a bit louder. Hopefully that's okay for everybody. Question 3 comes from Laura. How did you guys select the universities and the colleges who were invited to take part in the survey?
So it was the universities and colleges applied to participate. So the surveys are open to all FE colleges as part of their sort of subscription offer. And likewise for universities were having to subscribe to participate. So it is open to all, and it's open to, not just thinking about student voice, but very much bringing on board professional services, teaching staff and researchers. And the team are currently analysing those different groups, and we'll be sharing those reports in due course. So you actually have a holistic view across the organisation in relation to their experience.
Okay, we need to let Claire do the final slide, but we've just got one final question, which is how is accessibility being handled in recorded lectures?
I don't have any further information on that. One of the advantages of the survey is that all the organisations who participate own their own data. We take an anonymised view of it and gather it together. But the beauty of the surveys is that organisations can interrogate their own data and look at particular things. And also, I'm going to let Sarah say it about involving the students, because I know you're passionate about this, Sarah. I'll let you come in there.
I will, but I'd also say join our JISC accessibility teams community, because within there has been a lot of discussion, a lot of great practice shared around the accessibility issues in relation to recording of lectures. So I can pop some links, or I can tweet some links later around that. There's a wealth of guidance that our accessibility team can support you on as well with that.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just, Claire, you were going to do a wind up, weren't you? So I'll just hand over to you to do that. Thank you ahead of that for both Sarah and Claire for doing this presentation. It's been great. Okay, over to you, Claire.
Thank you. It'll be very brief, then you can all have your lunch. So just to say that we're starting our next round. So we have other surveys that we're in the process of analysing. The teaching staff one will come out in November. We're working on that at the moment, and we have professional services staff and researchers which will follow that. We're about to start the 2021-22 surveys, and you can find out all you need to know about it on the website. We do have an event coming up which is open to everybody, not just those subscribed. We've got a community of practice event on the 17th of November, and we'd love to see anyone who's interested in this work there. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you to all the participants. Thank you for the questions, and thanks to you both.
Thank
we'll
you.
have a break now. Bye.
Bye.